I always thought my life was normal. From the outside, people would look at me and say I was lucky. I had a stable marriage, a home that felt safe, and a partner who, in his own quiet way, cared for me. But deep down, something was missing. The spark that once made my heart race had faded, replaced by silence at the dinner table and conversations that only circled around bills, responsibilities, or daily routines. I told myself this was marriage, that passion was just a phase, and that comfort was all that mattered. But late at night, lying in bed next to someone who felt miles away, I couldn't shake the emptiness inside me. It was during those lonely moments that he entered my life. He wasn't supposed to matter. At first, he was just another familiar face, someone I would cross paths with occasionally. But he noticed things. He noticed the way my eyes lingered on the ground when I was tired, the way I brushed my hair behind my ear when I was nervous, and the way my laughter hid a sadness I thought no one else could see. His attention was soft, almost innocent at first, but it awakened something in me that had been asleep for too long. I remember the first time we really talked. It wasn't anything extraordinary, just a casual conversation about work, about life, but I felt a warmth in his tone that I hadn't felt in years. My husband loved me, I knew that, but he no longer looked at me like I was someone worth discovering. This man, though, looked at me as if every word I spoke carried weight, as if I was fascinating. That was all it took for my heart to betray me. At night, I found myself replaying our conversations in my head, remembering the way his eyes lingered a moment longer than they should have, the way his smile seemed to be meant only for me. I tried to dismiss it as imagination, a simple crush, something harmless. But the more I saw him, the more the silence in my own home grew unbearable. I started comparing the two men, though I hated myself for it. One gave me security, a roof, a name, a marriage that looked perfect. The other gave me something I hadn't realized I was starving for: attention, curiosity, the thrill of being wanted. The first time his hand brushed against mine, it was accidental, or at least that's what I told myself. My pulse quickened, my breath caught in my chest, and for a fleeting moment, I felt alive again. I should have stepped back, created distance, but instead I lingered. I found myself craving those small accidents, shoulders brushing in a crowded space, knees touching when we sat too close. Each one felt like fire on my skin, burning me, warning me, and yet drawing me in deeper. I would lie awake at night and ask myself why I was doing this. Why wasn't my husband's love enough? Why did I feel like something was missing when I already had so much? The guilt was heavy, but it wasn't enough to stop the racing of my heart whenever I saw him again. And that was the truth I didn't want to face. Guilt had become weaker than desire. One evening, when the air was heavy and quiet, I found myself alone with him. It wasn't planned, or maybe it was fate, or maybe it was both. The silence stretched between us, thick with unspoken thoughts, until he stepped closer. My breath trembled. My heart pounded so loud I was afraid he could hear it. "We shouldn't," I whispered, though a part of me was already leaning in. His eyes searched mine, as if asking for permission, as if giving me one last chance to walk away. But I didn't. When his lips finally brushed mine, it felt like a dam breaking inside me. Years of loneliness, of suppressed longing, of unspoken need came flooding out all at once. I knew it was wrong. I knew I was betraying the vows I had once promised to keep, but in that moment, none of it mattered. For the first time in years, I felt wanted, desired, alive. Later that night, when I returned home, I looked at my husband as he sat on the couch, his eyes fixed on the television, oblivious to the storm raging inside me. I wanted to tell him, to scream, to confess, but instead, I just sat beside him in silence. My heart was beating for another man, and I knew this was only the beginning. The days that followed felt like walking on the edge of a cliff, knowing that one wrong step would send me tumbling into an abyss I could never escape. I tried to convince myself that what had happened was a mistake, that it would end with a single kiss, buried in silence and forgotten with time. But the memory haunted me. Every time I closed my eyes, I felt the warmth of his lips, The way his hands had lingered at my waist, the way he had looked at me as though I was the only person in the world. I told myself to avoid him, to pull away before it was too late. But fate, or maybe my own weakness, had other plans. He reached out to me with messages that were simple on the surface, but carried hidden meanings. Hope your day is better today. You seemed tired earlier. Take care of yourself. Each word was a temptation, each notification on my phone a spark that ignited something I couldn't control. My hands would tremble as I typed back, carefully choosing words that sounded casual but meant everything. The secrecy gave it power. Knowing that my husband was in the next room while I smiled at another man's message made my pulse race. I hated myself for it, but at the same time, I felt more alive than I had in years. It was as if I was living two lives, one of quiet stability, the other of forbidden fire. Our conversations deepened. We stopped talking about ordinary things and started sharing our private aches and hidden dreams. I told him about my loneliness, how invisible I felt in my own home. He told me about his own emptiness, how he longed for something real, something consuming. The more we confessed, the closer we became, and soon, words weren't enough. One evening, when shadows stretched long across the room, we met again. This time, there was no hesitation. The moment his hand touched mine, I felt my defenses crumble completely. My body betrayed my mind, leaning into him, aching for more. I whispered that we couldn't, that it was wrong, but the words dissolved as quickly as they came. My voice shook when I said, "Stop," but my fingers were clinging to his shirt, pulling him closer. And that was when I realized the truth. I didn't want him to stop. The faster he went, the deeper I fell, until I was drowning in a sea of emotions I had no control over. My heart raced with guilt, but it also pulsed with desire, and the two twisted together until I couldn't tell them apart. Afterward, I sat in silence, my body trembling, my mind screaming with the weight of what I had done. I looked at him, searching for regret in his eyes, but all I saw was hunger. He leaned closer, brushing a strand of hair from my face, and whispered, "This is only the beginning." I went home that night with my heart pounding against my ribs, terrified of the lies that had already begun spilling into my marriage. My husband asked me where I had been, and I told him I'd gone for a walk, needing fresh air. He believed me. He didn't see the guilt written all over my face, or maybe he chose not to. I wanted to confess, to beg for forgiveness, but I couldn't. A part of me didn't want to, because the truth was, I wasn't ready to let go. The forbidden had wrapped itself around me like chains, heavy yet intoxicating. Each time I thought of ending it, I remembered the way he touched me, the way he made me feel like a woman again, not just a wife fulfilling roles and duties. That thought alone was enough to pull me back into his orbit, no matter how wrong it was. Nights became harder. I would lie awake beside my husband, feeling the distance grow between us while memories of the other man's lips lingered on my skin. I told myself I could manage it, that I could balance both lives without either collapsing. But deep down, I knew I was walking toward a storm I couldn't outrun. The affair had begun, and with it, the destruction I had once thought I was too careful to allow. And yet, even with fear clawing at me, I couldn't stop waiting for the next message, the next stolen touch, the next moment where guilt and desire would consume me whole. Each day that passed pulled me deeper into a world I had once sworn I would never enter. What began as stolen moments soon turned into a relentless craving, a hunger that refused to be silenced. I would wake up in the morning and glance at my phone before anything else, hoping to see his name glowing on the screen. His words had become the first breath I took each day, the spark that carried me through hours of pretending. At home, I wore the mask of a dutiful partner, going through motions as though nothing had changed. I cooked, I smiled, I listened, but inside I was living somewhere else, inside a fire that burned whenever he touched me, whenever he whispered things that made my heart pound. The double life was intoxicating, but it was also terrifying. Every lie I told stacked higher, every excuse I made felt riskier than the last. He grew bolder with time. Where once he had been cautious, stealing quick glances and brushing my hand when no one was watching. Now he wanted more. He wanted entire evenings, long nights, weekends if we could steal them. I told him we needed to slow down, that people would notice, but he only smiled, that dangerous smile that pulled me closer even as I tried to step back. The thrill of secrecy was powerful. I can still remember the rush in my chest when we would sit in a cafe across town, far enough that no familiar faces would appear. I'd watch the door every few seconds, terrified of being recognized, but his hand on my knee under the table erased every thought except him. The danger made it sweeter, as though the world around us had disappeared and only we existed. But at night, when I returned home, the guilt would come crashing back. I would look at my husband and feel a stab of shame that nearly broke me. He had begun noticing the small changes, the way I smiled at my phone, the way I drifted away during conversations, the way my excuses grew more frequent. His eyes searched me sometimes, as if he was reaching for a truth he couldn't quite put into words. I wanted to tell him, to fall at his feet and beg for forgiveness, but instead, I lied. And with each lie, I lost another piece of myself. The affair wasn't just physical anymore. It was emotional, consuming every thought and moment. He knew how to make me feel alive, how to make me feel like the woman I used to be before routine dulled me down. With him, laughter came easily, touches felt electric, and every kiss was fire. But alongside that fire grew fear. Fear that it would all collapse. Fear that someone would find out. Fear that my husband's quiet patience would break into rage the day he discovered the truth. There were moments when I almost walked away. Moments when I sat in my car, staring at my phone, ready to delete every message, ready to end it all before it went too far. But then he would call, his voice dripping with need, reminding me of everything I thought I'd been missing, and I would crumble. I wasn't strong enough to let go. I wasn't brave enough to choose the right thing. And so I spiraled further. Nights that should have been spent beside my husband were spent in his arms. Excuses piled up, late work, errands, traffic. My heart pounded every time I opened the door to my own home, terrified that my husband could smell another man on my skin. Sometimes I'd scrub myself raw in the shower, trying to wash away the evidence, but no amount of soap could cleanse the guilt I carried inside me. The more I begged him to slow down, the faster he went. His messages grew more daring, his demands more reckless. He wanted to see me constantly, wanted to push us further into danger. A part of me loved it, the rush, the desperation, but another part of me was drowning. I could feel the walls closing in, the lies becoming too heavy to hold. I began to sense that this couldn't last forever. Something had to break. The question wasn't if, but when. And in my heart, I knew the storm was closer than I wanted to believe. The unraveling came slowly, like cracks spreading across glass. At first, they were small, almost invisible, but soon, no matter how much I tried to hide them, they began to show. My husband's questions grew sharper. He asked why I was always distracted, why my phone was never out of reach, why I smelled of perfume even when I claimed I'd only gone for errands. I laughed it off, made excuses, but his eyes no longer softened with trust the way they once had. Suspicion had taken root, and I could feel it in every tense silence between us. One evening, when the weight of my double life felt unbearable, I told myself I would end it. I sat in my car outside his apartment, my heart pounding, rehearsing the words I would say. I imagined walking away, deleting every message, and returning home to mend what I had broken. But when I knocked on his door and he pulled me inside, kissing me with a hunger that set my entire body on fire, all my rehearsed lines disappeared. Once again, I gave in. Once again, I betrayed everything I had sworn to protect. It was after that night that everything collapsed. My husband had followed me. He didn't storm in, he didn't shout. He simply waited, and when I returned home, he was there, sitting on the couch in silence, his face pale, his hands clenched into fists. The sight of him shattered me. I knew instantly that he had seen, that every lie I had told had led to this moment. "Where were you?" he asked, his voice calm, too calm. I tried to answer, but the words tangled in my throat. My silence was louder than any confession could have been. His eyes glistened, not with anger, but with a hurt so deep it cut through me like a knife. He whispered, "I gave you everything I could, and it still wasn't enough." I wanted to scream, to tell him that it wasn't his fault, that the emptiness inside me wasn't because of him, but because of me. But he didn't want explanations. He simply stood, walked to the bedroom, and closed the door, leaving me alone in the quietest house I had ever known. The days that followed were unbearable. He moved through the home like a ghost, barely looking at me, barely speaking. The trust was gone, shattered into pieces I could never put back together. I tried to reach him, to apologize, to beg for another chance, but he had built a wall so high I couldn't climb it. And when he finally packed his bags, he didn't slam the door or curse my name. He just left in silence, and that silence was louder than any rage could have been. I turned to the man I had risked everything for, hoping to find solace, to find love. But he was different now, too. The passion we shared lost its shine once it was exposed to the light of reality. What had once been thrilling now felt heavy, tainted. He wanted more from me than I could give, demanded a future I wasn't ready to face. And slowly, I realized he wasn't my escape. He was just another chain holding me down. The irony cut deep. In chasing passion, I had lost stability. In seeking love, I had destroyed the one person who truly loved me. I was left standing in the ruins of everything I had built, holding nothing but regrets. Sometimes, late at night, I hear echoes of my own voice in my mind. I remember the moments when I whispered, "Stop," when I begged him to slow down, when I knew we were heading into disaster. But he kept going faster, and I kept letting him. And in the end, he wasn't the one who paid the price. I was. I sit alone now, replaying the choices that brought me here. The laughter, the stolen kisses, the lies, the betrayal. All of it plays in my head like a film I can't turn off. I wonder if there's forgiveness in this world for someone like me, or if I am doomed to carry the weight of my mistakes forever. All I know is that once I had a life, a love, and a home. And now I have only the memory of what it felt like to be wanted and the reality of what it cost me. I kept begging him to stop, but he kept going faster until everything I loved was gone.